Oh man, look at this dude walking by in like 5 frames a second. What is up with this kid with the coffee? Oh my god. Yeah, I'm walking here. I'm having my coffee. I'm walking with my coffee. Oh my god. That's so hilarious. Hey everyone, Sean here, and today I wanted to sit down and talk about one of my most personally beloved gaming franchises of all time, Pokemon. And of course, Scarlet and Violet are the latest main title games to have come out for November of 2022, marking the 9th generation, or Gen 9. A number of you know at this point that I love Pokemon, and I still have that same groove for Pokemon for the most part. But did Scarlet and Violet create a harsh ripple in those waters, so to say? We'll find out in today's review. So I picked up Scarlet, the red title for this iteration, as I have mostly, with some exceptions such as Blue and X. But anyways, I was able to complete the main story and the post-game stuff just under 75 hours, which is, I think, a pretty decent amount for a Pokemon game, given the usual activities you are given, like grinding and all that such, and so on and so forth. So let's start with the graphics in this review. Now yes, the graphics, right. This is probably, and still, the most controversial thing to come out of this whole thing. Plus its performance as well. Yes, to me, the visual fidelity and everything in between is rather lackluster, to put it nicely. The environment designs is pretty much minimal for the both outdoor and city life aspects. Nothing really screamed to me. I really felt that there could have been a lot more creative eggs into that basket. Of course, its performance doesn't help with that either. The amount of pop-in is just so annoying here. There were many incidents where Pokemon just pop out of nowhere in front of you and start a battle, especially with the really tiny little Pokemon. That was absolutely irritating throughout my experience. Environments also glitched out briefly here and there on my end as well. However, other players had videos of themselves falling through and other anomalies early on. Let's not forget the frame rate. It's definitely not consistent. It seems like it has a hard time keeping up with itself somehow, especially in certain areas with water and or rain. It takes an absolute nose dive. By the way, I recently had not one but 2 crashes. During my first one, I did not have my autosave on somehow, so the one time I didn't save, sometime after, somehow it happened, and I had to turn that back on because I actually lost notable progress to an extent. I was kind of trying to catch one of the legendary Pokemon that comes from the ruins, right? This one was called Chimpao. I caught it, and then I didn't save somehow, and I went to one of the snowy regions or whatever, the snowy sections of that region, and it just suddenly crashed. And that one time I didn't save, I lost Chimpao and I had to get Chimpao again. That's what pretty much happened in that first crash. The other crash was during a random online session, and before a Terra raid could even get started. It pretty much just happened out of nowhere, trying to connect to a Terra raid. So that one wasn't too bad of a repercussion, but it was still a notable crash nonetheless. And yes, this was actually after a set of patches, so you can say its jank is at an all-time high. Early on, you can jump backwards with your ride Pokemon as a means to climb upwards. Yep. Oh, and the animations, it's quite the mixed bag, but one for sure that is pretty bad is the sandwich eating animation. The graphics, the fidelity, visuals, and performance department is just a complete, utter mess. A number of players have been defending the game by saying, oh, it's the Switch or hardware related issues. I mean, if you take a look at a number of games such as Xenoblade, even the very recent Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that point, I think it's safe to say, will get blown out of the water, especially at this point. So not only there's not a whole lot visually interesting going on with the environments, it can't even keep a decent frame rate at times. Even at 30 frames per second, that's pretty bad if you ask me. Continuing on with the topic of visuals, allow me to shift over to the Pokemon and the characters when it comes to visual designs. It's a bit of a mixed bag here, I think, but I really do like Nemona's design. I think she looks simply cool with the hair and the glove, the one glove she's rocking. I think that's a really nice touch to it. Kind of reminds me of Tekken for some reason, right? Like especially with Jin's glove, and just having it on one arm kind of makes it a little more cool in a different regard. Not to mention she's pretty much like Goku by personality. She can pass as Goku's daughter for all we care. If Goku somehow wound up in the Pokemon universe somehow in some way. Meanwhile, the gym leaders is where I have more of those mixed feelings. This time around, I have a few favorite designs that come to mind, like Larry and Rhyme. They were amongst my favorites, but the rest of them I just couldn't resonate with them, design-wise and even personality-wise. Not terrible per se, but not my cup of tea. I think this is the first time in a long time I felt like this for the gym leaders, if not ever. In Sword and Shield, I thought all the gym leader designs were great, especially with Raihan, Bia, Nessa, and Piers. Next, I wanted to talk about the rest of the school characters, such as the teachers. They were interesting in both design and personality-wise, and you can actually take classes to learn terms within Scarlet and Violet. You can also learn some trivia and other stuff along the way, which is kind of nice, kind of neat actually. Of course, I personally like the Dendra most. You can kind of guess why. Now, the Elite Four. This is kind of different. It seems to be a little more memorable in terms of just visual design this time around. Rika, to be specific. Like, damn. I mean, she just looks really cool with that simplistic design, you know, with the dark green long hair, the dress shirt, the tie, the tight slacks with the suspenders. Something about that combination had won me over along with a lot of people, especially the fan artists. Although it's funny because a lot of people were like, wait, that's a chick? You know, because of her like very subtle figure in comparison to the other ladies in the game, or just in general really nowadays. It's also really funny because Grusha kind of had the same sort of treatment, except, you know, he is a male, and a lot of people thought initially that Grusha was a female. So these characters had some really interesting social media engagement, especially with the whole Nemona / Goku comparison. That one I thought was really funny in the grand scheme of things. Speaking of characters, let's talk about Nemona and the others. I like these characters' relationships better than Sword and Shield overall. At some point, they all get together and make it really believable that they're all part of a gang of sorts. I just wish for something like that in Sword and Shield, especially with how most of the characters were, you know, likable as individuals for the most part, but their friendship was never fully like sort of fleshed out, so to say. They never had that moment all together in one group. I like Nemona because of how much he's like Goku or just any anime protagonist from the 90s, just obsessed with fighting completely, and the memes that came along with that were just great. Yeah, I thought they were really hilarious. Arven and Penny are definitely, you know, characters that grew on me later on in the game. They didn't really initially won me over at the start. As this game is open world, there are 3 sections for the story within Pokemon. You have Victory Road, which is the typical gym stuff. You have the Team Star story, which is a little more along the lines of like Team Rocket, etc., etc. And then you have the Herba Mystica story, which is the one you're fighting with the Titan Pokemon and you're making the fancy Subway sandwiches rather for a certain Pokemon, really. That one's actually pretty sad and really melancholy rather in comparison to the other stories that have come out over the years. Especially when you get on to the later stuff of things, that gets pretty sob heavy, let's just put it that way. And to go along with that, there are actually some nice cutscenes to really complement the visual side of things of the story. Now, importantly, the core gameplay. And at this point, it's pretty unanimous that this is carrying the game. Honestly, this is probably the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game in a long time. Something about being given the option to do essentially whatever you want really does something to the Pokemon formula. The new flow is just enough to really keep the game fresh while retaining the core Pokemon essence that players will look forward to. Even with all the visual slog that was met through my experience, the gameplay really helped me overlook that in a way. I was running, flying, swimming, and at some point climbing across Paldea to find new places and of course the Pokemon. It is worth mentioning that Pokemon Legends was pretty much the predecessor in that regard. There are things that carry over to here, mainly the Pokemon World format, and you can still sneak around and throw Pokeballs to not catch them but to get the advantage at the start of the battle. And yes, this Pokemon does feature an auto battle mode called Let's Go mode, which is handy when you want to get materials to produce TMs in this game. Let's talk about the Pokemon themselves. I actually do like the new Pokemon designs more than I expected. Baxcalibur is silly as hell, but I can't help but smile because of that signature move, Glaive Rush, which is very reminiscent of classic Godzilla, especially if you really watched, I believe, Godzilla vs. Hedorah. The starters are pretty decent this time around. Of course, I had to go to my Fireboy, Fuecoco, and I did like its evolution designs. I just wish that the sombrero was kept in the final evolution. That you kind of saw from the second evolution. It kind of just disappears, unfortunately, in the final one. But despite that, I did like the final evolution for Fuecoco, which is Skeledirge, I believe it's called. Now, I do remember there was that weird hate for Sprigatito because, you know, the idea of evolving into a bipedal Pokemon during the initial trailers was, you know, something I've seen quite a bit in the comments. And around that same time, oddly enough, I actually learned that Incineroar got hate because of being, you know, bipedal. It's so weird. And what's even more odd to me that, you know, when the final evolutions came to light, no one really said anything. I don't think no one really like just blew up and you know, talked about it ever since. Oh, you know, because here, you know, Sprigatito's final evolution is bipedal indeed, right? But I personally didn't see the whole blow up that, you know, I was expecting to see. I don't know, maybe people just got tired or something, or people just forgot. People were just weird, man. I don't know, maybe it's just me, I don't know. Although the new controversy during the launch month was Quaquaval, which is Quaxly's final evolution, because of how once again feminine it looked, kind of like with Primarina from Sun and Moon. I'm personally indifferent about it, but boy, I definitely saw some very mixed comments along the way. Anyway, one of my most favorite new designs is simple as Clodsire. I just really like how simple it looks. It's just so adorable looking and kind of dopey looking to it. That, you know, that brown shade and just the hands and the tail, just how round it looks. You know, if there was a very big plushie of Clodsire later on from the official Pokemon Center, I'm gonna be very tempted to buy it, especially if it's a pretty nice sized plushie. I also like Low Kicks, you know, the Common Rider black little grasshopper thing that stands up bipedal, you know, at that, with the third set of legs being somewhere in a different location. Very interesting design. I also really like Annihilate with its lore, and also reminds me of like Akuma slash Necalli from Street Fighter. King Gambit, that's another cool design. Tinkaton is a really cute but awesome design, I thought. Armarouge and Ceruledge, I think. Those two are really cool. They remind me of like Mega Man bosses or Mega Man just designs in general. And then later on, depending on which versions you get, once you go into post game, you get to encounter some interesting designs or interesting sort of versions of certain Pokemon with the future slash ancient designs. I think those were really interesting and pretty cool for what they are, as goofy as they are as well. I like goofy but cool designs. That's just me anyway. Not only that, some of them have very interesting moves and gimmicks this time around, especially gimmicks on how to evolve them. You know, back on to King Gambit and Annihilate, so on and so forth. The way you have to evolve them is actually pretty funny. So definitely you have not only the content for main game, but of course with post game. While you're doing your thing in Paldea, you also have Terror Raids. These events are pretty much the Dynamax raids that you've seen from Sword and Shield. You can either fight them with CPUs, or you can fight them with players online to help take down the terrestrialized Pokemon that are, sometimes really difficult to fight, especially with how many stars you go into. This, of course, is the main mechanic for this time around, the terrestrialized, or whatever you call it. Being crystallized, I like to just simply call them. While visually unimpressive, mechanically it can be interesting with the idea of changing the type of your Pokemon on the fly to either enhance their offense or cover their weaknesses. I do wish at some point, somewhere in some Pokemon main game, you just go ahead and say screw this and throw in all the cool stuff like Mega Evolutions and Dynamaxing, right? They kind of throw in the everyone is here sort of gimmick, like Smash Ultimate, throw in all the mechanics and just, go ahead and open Pandora's box or whatever and and just see what happens, right? I would love to see that, even though probably the balance would go to, hit the fan or anything or whatever, but, I kind of want to see it. I think a lot of casuals would like to see that too. But back on to Terra Raids. Now I must say the Terra Raids online experience needs some improvement. Trying to get into a lobby can be a nightmare. I get lucky at times getting into the raids that I want, but choosing random is pretty much your go-to. But it is what it is. It's just random, so you never know what you'll get. Although I've actually gotten some Violet exclusive Pokemon along the way, so that's actually pretty cool. I just wish you're able to refresh the lobby quicker and have an indication whether the lobby is actually full or not. Those things need to be ironed out quite a bit for that to be a good experience. Other notes worth noting, the music is pretty decent overall. Not much to say this time around, unfortunately, but it's kind of there and it does its job. Some of them are pretty cool for some people. For me, it was kind of like indifference. There are some that are, pretty good, but it's not something I'm like gushing over, like Sword and Shield soundtrack, oddly enough, or the older ones from the past. This time around, hey, I mean, it's kind of there. I mean, it is kind of cool sometimes. That's just how I feel about Scarlet Violet soundtrack for this case here. When it comes to moves, you can actually switch it out on the fly with each Pokemon to suit your needs, instead of having an NPC to do that for you. You don't have to go to that one place to do that one thing. Although I just wish you have loadouts for each Pokemon, so you don't have to like keep changing in between the raids and battles and such like that. You don't have to have like separate Pokemon for this specific thing. At least though, you can do that. It's actually pretty cool. If you actually do it for yourself, it's nice. It's kind of nice once you really get to know the game. Not only can you change the moves on the fly, but you can actually change the nicknames on the fly if you're into that kind of thing. If you're those players like me who like to nickname their Pokemon like non-stop pretty much, this is definitely a nice feature. Instead of having a name raider or whatever, you can just do it yourself right in the menu. It's actually pretty nice. Breeding is quite different this time around, since you can just do it during your picnic, which sounds really weird when you really break it down. but anyway. So I believe that's all the major stuff I have in mind to say overall. So all in all, while this game has a lot of jank that you've seen from the internet, it's actually a lot more fun than I initially expected. I think Pokemon Legends really helped experiment a new sort of new enough formula to keep things fun while retaining that Pokemon fun that players always, really look forward to. In fact, I think it's a similar case with Arceus Legends. There's a lot of ambition and good ideas and concepts and such. The execution really cries for improvement, especially from a multi-billion-dollar company. So I gotta be a little more hard on this one this time around. It's something you should expect as a consumer for these games. So we gotta give them that. So with that, I'm gonna give this game a relatively generous 6 out of 10, which has been a while since I gave anything that low of a score for a game on this channel. Yes, there are patches coming in, but it should have not happened in the first place, especially for a game company this big. I believe Game Freak needs to better manage themselves from this point on and fine-tune their craft. Hopefully this is a wake-up call though, since the reviews throughout its launch month are calling them out for, improvements and fixes and such. So I hope the next Pokemon main game will see, much less of that. But for now, I expect to see like the DLC updates for the game, similar to that of Sword and Shield. We'll just probably just get that size of content later on in the year of 2023. So that's kind of what we can expect for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for the rest of its cycle. So thank you all for tuning in for my review for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment your opinion on this Pokemon title in case you've played it. Thanks again for your time, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Sean out.